With Patrick Findoro here, co-founder at Visa Franchise and Vetted Biz. Excited to have on Kurt Buske, who's the president and co-founder of A Better Solution in Home Care, also called ABS. Kurt, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we've been working together some time with our foreign national clients at Visa Franchise. You treated them well. Thanks again for all that support. And many of them are doing more of a semi-absentee model that I want to go in on today's video, as it's very applicable for Americans also that don't want to leave their day job. It doesn't make financial sense to leave their day job. But before we get into the exact model in your business, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you entered into this space.
Yeah, well, I'll try and make that long story summarized. But so I'm probably had a few careers in my life. My bachelor's is in business administration, human resources management. My first career, I was an HR director for a major multi-million-dollar pet supply retail company. And then I became a social worker. I got my master's degree in social work, became a medical social worker, worked in a variety of different types of environments. And some of those environments are environments that we interact with in home care. In terms of ending up with a better solution, I was running a nonprofit organization for about a decade that provided support services to family caregivers. Like if you were taking care of one of your parents and needed resources or was stressed out, didn't know what to do. And we had some government funding for respite care. So we were the only nonprofit in San Diego County at the time that was able to give out really funded contracts to non-medical home care organizations. And so I contracted, there were about over 200 organizations in our territory at the time. And I contracted with 12 of the best. And A Better Solution was one of my contracted vendors. And so got to know Leah Smith, our founder and CEO, over the course of about 10 years. She jokes and says it was the longest interview ever, right? And, eventually I was in career transition and she, offered me the opportunity to be her business partner and just really helped create this franchise system. So I came on over in 2015 and that's really when we started. But really as a franchisor, I mean, it's very important to understand, right, that, I understood home care because I worked a lot with home care organizations, but I needed to understand the industry better from the inside, right? So I spent like my first year really, we were preparing to franchise, but part of preparing a business to franchise, it's more than just an FDD, right? It's understanding that the business of being a franchisor is different than the business you're in here now. So you may be a technical expert in this industry in home care. That doesn't mean you know anything about franchising. So, part of the preparation is really, figuring out how to take all of this expertise and information and policies and procedures and forms and put them in a box, so to speak, and in a format that can be teachable, right? And a format that you can really replicate, and taking, kind of all that information and knowledge out of our founder's head and putting that in a format that can, really help educate and inspire our franchisees. So, that was really kind of my first calling. So really working on this side of the table of home care in ops at our multi-million-dollar home office. And that business is still in existence. And then we started franchising. So I think that my background in business and has been helpful, but also my background in so many different aspects of healthcare, from working in hospitals to, working with family caregivers to, partnering, contracting with home care organizations, and just really understanding the healthcare landscape that home care fits into and speaking that language. I think that broad perspective has been real helpful because I didn't have this siloed like home care perspective at the time. So
Kurt, during that 1 year period of like diving into the industry, what were some surprising figures, stats, or just findings about this industry that further piqued your interest to continue on with ABS?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I'd say that the biggest surprise was the way that a majority of our competitors operated. Now, I got marketed to by all of these organizations, these home care organizations, when I was a referral source, right? So that's another valuable experience because I saw how people marketed home care and I knew what turned me on and what turned me off. And 95% of the people that marketed to me turned me off. And I was just a referral source. I was a social worker, right? So, we really kind of talked a lot about, how can we teach people to market to a way that really attracts the attention of somebody like myself? But one of the surprises was the ways in which a lot of our competitors operated didn't really honor the work that caregivers did. By and large, I found in talking to caregivers and orienting probably 200 caregivers at our home office, finding that people really felt like gig workers. They felt like, this is a weird industry, right? Because, 75, 80%, maybe a little bit more of your workforce works for other home care agencies, works for your competitors, get a few hours here, a few hours here, a few hours here. So organizations naturally fall into the trap of just having caregivers on their roster, not really treating this like a real business or a real job.
Yeah.
Giving
like
them
a culture. It must be hard to really foster a culture when they're operating akin to basically an Uber driver, for lack of a better example.
So where's their home base? They work for all these agencies. And so you have people that are working for competitors doing the same thing with them that they're doing for you. And so how do you really differentiate? And so I found that there were things that we could do as a brand, some of which we were already doing, that made a lot of sense and sort of built out this structure where hopefully people are looking at their experience with a better solution as their home base, even though they work for other organizations. Things like employee recognition and really managing performance, having a formal structure for managing the performance of your care team, giving them an opportunity to be successful through communication and formalized communication when they're really not adhering to performance expectations, but having clear performance expectations and making that path and expectations clear for care staff, and not just saying, here's policies and procedures, you're oriented, you're signed on, we're going to offer you work, right? Doing things like employee recognition, giving caregivers the opportunity to have performance evaluations and merit increases, and some of the things that they're not getting with a lot of the organizations out there. I think the top home care organizations and brands do these things, but a majority probably don't do all those things. At least that's what I've found in talking to a lot of caregivers. So I think that was my biggest surprise in terms of the lack of attention placed on really managing, inspiring, and cultivating that caregiving workforce, and really creating a sense of culture and embracing that culture, because you have a home care brand in this industry, but it's not enough just to communicate that culture to your franchise owners and managers. That has to trickle down to the care team, because those are the people that are the most forward facing with your clients, right? So it's kind of a tricky industry like that. Communication, I think I was a little surprised in terms of how challenging communication is in this environment. It's one of the number one challenges beyond caregiver retention and things that you experience with the low-wage workforce. Because if you think about it, your work sites are your clients' homes. And your clients never come into a central place like your office. They're in these homes. So if you have 25, clients in a day, you might have 25 work sites. Can you imagine if you had 25 restaurants and getting everybody on the same page? And so, you have to really instill very focused things to, inspire quality assurance and ensure that staff at a franchise location, administrative staff are spending time, on a scheduled basis out where the work is being done. So,
are there any software companies or vendors that have really kind of helped you execute on this mission?
Yeah, there's a lot of home care software systems out there, but all of them really have some mechanisms built in to inspire communication. The software system we utilize has what's called a call center, which is really a repository for notes. And so you can really put a note about a quality assurance visit and assign a follow-up to another staff member. Caregivers and clients all have access to the system, and they can see, client needs and care plans. Family can as well, schedules, EVV, which is electronic visit verification, allowing caregivers to, how do you know if a caregiver showed up to a home, to deal with a client? And so mechanisms to ensure that we get pinged if somebody hasn't clocked into a shift. But things like that, if you're just using hard copy timesheets or something like that, you may have a lot of issues going on where, as an organization, you really don't know who's receiving services on a particular day or hour. So
things you're not operating at 100% if this isn't on the cloud.
Yeah, so things like that, we've really instituted a variety of mechanisms to ensure, and facilitate communication. that the team is all on the same page, quality assurance, and ensuring that we understand people are where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there.
What's harder right now for a better solution franchisees? Finding the caregivers and making sure they stay on and lowering the attrition rate, or is it finding the predominantly seniors that they're caring for?
So this is the $1 million question, okay? And there's a lot of chat constantly about this amongst home care owners nationally, okay? And I think, depending upon the owner you talk to, some people might say, I need more business, right? Maybe they're not marketing enough or whatever it is. But by and large, the theme is one of the biggest challenges, and some people call it a crisis. I don't. But one of the biggest challenges in this industry is caregiver recruitment and retention, right? And part of the challenge is this. There's numerous things that figure into that. And this has all been it's always been a challenge, right? Because you have a low-wage workforce that have a ton of opportunity. Every home care organization in their area is always hiring. We're one of those weird industries where the help wanted sign is always up. Why? Well, how do you scale a home care business? Well, to scale any business, you have to have the things that you sell. You have to have the resources, right? And so in home care, really, you can't scale your business unless you scale your roster of caregivers. But your roster of caregivers won't stay on your roster if you don't have work for them. They're going to go somewhere else. So it's this always chicken or the egg kind of game that you're playing, right? And so I do think that it's a significant challenge. In our environment today, we've witnessed a demand for higher wages. The federal minimum wage has not gone up to levels that were, have been talked about on a national level.
Yeah, very few people in the United States make minimum wage compared to other countries.
And so what's happened is in the last couple of years, you have people that won't get out of bed for less than 15 or 16 bucks an hour, which is what's been talked about at the federal level, raising the minimum wage there, right? And so you have this environment now where people want more money, right? And they may get really flaky if you're not paying them what they feel like they're worth or what they feel like they can get. And so attracting caregivers, if you don't have a ton of work to build out for them, or if you're not offering them exactly what they want, can be challenging. But how do you retain caregivers? And that's the biggest challenge because, look, it's just a numbers game. And what I tell people when they go, it's a crisis, I can't find people. I set up 10 interviews. I confirmed them. 1 or 2 people showed up. And what we say is that's how it works. Like, you just got to know going in that you're doing nothing wrong. You set up 10 interviews, 1 or 2 people show up.
You're not hiring an investment banker or a software developer where 98% of them are going to show up to the interview.
Nope. And you rinse and repeat. And you just do this every day. But now it begs the question, if you're bringing these people on and you're not having a solid onboarding effort and you don't have work available, you're going to lose them. And so you've wasted all this time and effort. So retention is a challenge. And certainly pay figures into retention, but also the quality of the work environment. But one of the biggest things that people need to understand to retain their care staff is they need to understand what they want. What hours do you want? What kind of schedule do you want? What are you looking for in this gig? You took this job. What do you want? And so really one of the best things you can do to retain these staff is give them the schedule they want, because they're in this game because they can have some control over when they work. Right? I mean, that's the nice thing about it is I can only work these days or these hours. And in home care, they can take a shift or not, right? And so if you're able to target particular caregivers and give them close to the hours they want or the hours they want, it's the best way you can retain them because you're giving them what they want. Right.
Great advice. And I think that can translate to a lot of different industries as well. And that are well suited for franchising and beyond.
I think so. The big challenge, though, Patrick, is it's caregiver recruitment and retention. And so what I mean by the big challenge is that it's a pillar of the business. And so a pillar would really dictate that it's something you have to have somebody dedicated to that they're doing every day. So caregiver recruitment, staffing, and scheduling, you have to have somebody focused on that. Because if you have the same person doing that, and then they're developing business as well, they're pulled, what they're doing is they're putting half time on those pillars: business development, caregiver recruitment, staffing, and scheduling.
Yeah, it's like you have the operations manager that becomes a COO handling the HR and recruitment side, and then you have the sales manager that becomes the CEO doing sales and business dev.
Outwardly focused, inwardly focused is kind of how it rolls. So it's just, if what we try and do is coach people and train people on, this is the business, this is part of the business. So it's not like it doesn't have to be a crisis. It's just something you put attention on every single day.
That's the modus operandi if you want to run a home care business in the United States, and you can do very well. But it's like, I have a friend that runs an executive coach business, and there's buses breaking down, and that's just life. And you can't let those things stress you out because there's going to be issues, and that's just the market. You have your eyes open when you go into it.
Exactly right. And so it's incumbent upon, a franchisor in any industry, right? I think if somebody's looking to get into the franchise world, they want to really do some assessment of, is this franchisor in the business that, they're franchising? And if they're not, how long were they in this business, and how do they keep their finger on the pulse of industry changes, right? Because, and that's why I think it's valuable, like with a system like ours, is we do this at a very high level every day. I mean, we have a multi-million-dollar non-medical home care organization in San Diego, California that's been alive for 23 years. And so that type of experience, we're in it, and we're able to pilot ideas and things at the home office before we roll them out to a franchise system. So we're not testing things in the franchise system. We test them in our home shop, right? And so it gives us that opportunity. And this industry is changing and transitioning, and it should be, because quite frankly, I think it's an exciting time for the industry. And it's no mystery why, is it? I mean, our consumer base is typically people in their 80s and 90s, and that's the fastest growing age demographic in the United States. And so, there's a huge need that many older adults have for services that help them stay at home. They largely don't want to be in an institutional environment or a facility. And so, I think it's really helpful to work with a franchisor that walks that talk every single day.
For sure. Yeah. And you're not treating the franchisee as a guinea pig as you test the different marketing campaigns or HR tactics. Kurt, can you tell me more about the economics of the business model? So I don't know if you use full-time caregiver working 40 hours a week or by hour, but what kind of revenue multiple, or what are we looking at per caregiver? How many thousand of revenue, a month or a year for it to make sense?
We don't really look at it that way. We really kind of look at, in home care, we kind of look at hours per week of service, right? Not necessarily number of caregivers, because you might have a caregiver working with a client 12 hours a day, right? And that's going to be extremely meaningful. Or you might have another caregiver working 2 hours a week. So we kind of look at hours, because you could have a location billing a real healthy amount with a handful of 24/7 clients, and another location that has 4 times the number of clients and caregivers, but they're do the same performance. And so, generally speaking, in this business, 10 years ago, we used to say, bill double what you pay your care team, right? And so you got that 50% gross margin, I call it, because that just includes bill rate minus wages. Okay. These days, you're fine if you're putting out. You don't want to really put out more than 60%, but a lot of organizations are doing 60%, 55 to 60% of bill rate out in payroll. So kind of a 45% gross. You really don't want to see under 40% that you're keeping of that bill rate once wages have been paid. And then if you kind of follow those metrics, you're going to produce a more meaningful net profit margin when all is said and done. I mean, there's not a ton of overhead, right, in home care, because we're not a brick and mortar business. Just have a teeny office where you're interviewing and orienting caregivers. But, our more passively or semi-passively owned locations, you have owners that are paying salaries for those 2 pillar positions, recruitment, staffing coordinator, and a business development person. And so, their monthly spend is higher than an owner operator who's doing those pillar functions themselves.
Let's talk a little bit about the semi-absentee and absentee. I think that's how we originally connected maybe 3 or 4 years back, where we had clients that generally had a pretty significant net worth, and they had a very high opportunity cost to start a ground up business, whether it was a franchise or not, where they might be making 150 to 500K plus. How have you guys kind of molded that absentee, semi-absentee model over time to cater to not just foreign nationals, but a lot of Americans that don't want to give up their nice paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try and summarize a fairly complex question, right? We saw the writing on the wall, okay? And we were really seeing, we were talking to brokers. We have good relationships with brokers. I mean, I consider brokers like customers, right? And so, we really have a good relationship with a lot of brokers. And, a couple of them were saying like, look, things have changed in our world. And a majority of people they were saying that they talk to these days are people that are in this transition and sort of wanting to get out of the corporate world and really wanting to be the master of their own destiny and build their own business, but, can't afford to leave $150,000, $200,000, whatever job to deal with a startup business that they can't pull money off for their first whatever, right? Year and a half, whatever it is. And so we really saw that writing on the wall and created what we call a managed model. Now, people need to be careful because franchisors across industries, there's many out there that will say we have a passive ownership model. And I've talked to plenty of prospective owners that get to discovery day and then the cat's out of the bag and they realize this takes 20 hours a week of their time.
Or they talk to a couple of franchisees and it's like, no, dude, it's not like that. Like I have to put all this work.
Nothing, and maybe a vending machine or something, but nothing is truly fully passive.
If it was so passive and so risk-free, like you would just have a corporate office just keep doing it all day themselves,
Exactly.
Why would they need your money to do something that was truly passive?
The owner does need to have some involvement, even in our managed model. Now, in our managed model, most of our owners probably are, 5 some odd hours a week. And mostly it's being available to like their director, like their lead horse, right? And occasionally, like we could talk about it if we have time, but some of our passive owners have found ways to involve themselves in their business to generate business that's more behind the sales, is an easy way of saying it.
What would be some of those ways?
Like identifying contractual opportunities in their local market with
big sales opportunities that could bring in 50, 100, 200K.
Yeah, like with managed care organizations, with facilities, with different, elder care programs, chasing these down, applying for these, and then finding these contracts where, people can get home care, but they're not paying for it. And so that's been a really meaningful way. A couple of our passive owners, semi-passive owners, I should say, managed model owners have done this. Now, the genesis of this was around March of 2020. We didn't predict COVID. We just happened to launch this at the same time COVID came out. And so that was interesting. And it got a lot of attention because COVID got people really thinking about their lives and their careers.
Our website traffic for Vetted Biz just like skyrocketed during COVID. Just people were at home, working remote, spending a lot more time like Googling around.
So it was a perfect storm because people were looking for alternatives and businesses, but they were also faced with, I can't do this full time in a business. And so I need something like semi-passive. So that's when we launched this. Now, we've gone through a couple of iterations of it, and no home care franchisor in the U.S. offers a formal like managed model, right?
No, so usually it's very active owner-operator working 40, 60 plus hours a week.
Yeah, so we wanted to give an opportunity of business ownership in the home care industry to people that weren't able to directly join their business right now. And most of the people we talk to want to get off the managed model, want to join their business at some point progressively when it can afford them. And so we recognized that and put this model together, created a management services company called Caring Solutions Management Staffing. It's a separate company that is only set up to provide management oversight and support services to our managed model locations. And so we've learned a lot, right? We've learned a lot about the level of capitalization needed for this. Obviously, more capital is needed for somebody that's going to be, a semi-passive owner in the managed model, doing business through hired guns that we're coaching and kind of helping to oversee, than an owner-operator who's, with a business partner who's handling those pillar functions. So, we learned a lot about the capitalization required. We learned a lot about the type of support that we need to offer these locations. We learned a lot about the type of people, the personalities that work best in this hired gun lead horse role that's the face of a business in the community, but they're taking a paycheck. and the owner usually does that function. So we've learned a lot about that. It's interesting that, in home care, obviously, like I think one of the main reasons that all home care franchisors really want heavy owner involvement in the initial phases is because the owner is often the face of that business in the community. And so, we're in a position where we're really interacting with that director who's the face in the community, almost like we would interact with an owner. But it's a little bit of a different relationship in that they're an employee of the owner. And so we're pushing, guiding, looking at KPIs, et cetera. So, we didn't know how this was going to play out. But fast forward to today, we've realized it takes a lot of our management services company bandwidth to do this work. So we've had to build out a team. And, we've also realized the support services that are most meaningful to these owners. And we've also realized that it works. If owners are well enough capitalized to get their business to stand the test of time, that's very important to understand because a lot of people want a get-rich-quick scheme, and that is not home care. Home care...
Yeah, I'd love that. You invest right? $50K, you make $100K a year.
But Patrick, a lot of people are like that. A lot of people think that when I buy a franchise, it's like buying a car or a house or something, right? I'm buying this asset, and it's just going to... I'm going to be able to use it right away and it's going to, turn my life around. And
I guess a lot of people, I've had bad business dealings in my 20s. And so my antenna's a lot more up and basically just investigate franchises all day. So I see the good and bad. I guess a lot of people maybe they haven't had such bad business dealings and they're kind of just gullible to, sadly, swindlers and charlatans selling whatever they want to hear.
But Patrick, a lot of times people don't plan ahead, do they? And so they're like, I need to change my life today. And it's like buying a franchise. It's not going to change your life today, right? It's going to cause you to spend money today and tomorrow and for the next several months.
The first 2 years are really tough. We usually set the expectation, whether you're working day to day or you're going to have a managed model at ABS or a different company, 2 years, it's a big adjustment period. So just get ready for that. It will be tough. You'll learn a lot. You'll grow as a person, but it's not going to be easy.
I tell people don't count on drawing money off your business for yourself as an owner until you've been alive for 3+ years. And, I'm being pretty conservative when I say that. And some people don't like that, particularly people that want to draw money off their business right away. But I don't want people to get a false impression. And then if they beat that target, great. But I can say that, the managed model has been around for 3.5 years. We had our national franchise convention summit in San Diego in May of this year. And we honored our top performers, and 2 of our 3 top performers started out in the managed model. And the other top performers,
it's only been 3 years.
Well, I won't talk about time, but we started the managed model 3.5 years ago. Our other top performers, our oldest franchise, right, that had been around for 7-8 years. So,
Kurt, how many franchisees do you have open right now?
We have 21 open and we have 24 sold. So we have 21 open right now. And we have 2 corporate affiliates, the San Diego operation and another new location in the Phoenix market.
Going forward, or say of those 24, how many will start with the managed option versus them being an active owner operator from day one?
That's a good question. So let's talk about those 3 that are sold but waiting for licensure and not open yet. 2 are going to be managed model and 1 is owner operator. And so that's fairly typical. It seems like if I sell 3, probably 2 are going to be managed model. And honestly, that's the risk of creating something that nobody else has, is that we're sort of have become known in the broker world for that, right? And so a majority of the connections we get from franchise brokers are people that are looking for the managed model because they're interested in the industry, but there's literally no other option for them today. But, and so we have that differentiator that I think we've gotten known for, right? I mean, if we'd only been doing this for 6 months, we're not known for it. We've been doing this for 3.5 years. And so for better or worse, that's kind of what we're known for now. So as an organization, we have to be comfortable with that. And so we do limit our sales of this now. We didn't before, but now it's 5 to 6 a year is about our cap.
Well, you can just be a lot more selective in terms of the type of franchisees you onboard and just working with the partners you really want to be together with for the next 10, 20 years.
That's the deal. So we've learned a lot of those lessons, Patrick, and really, because look, there was no blueprint. So how do we know the type of person that's going to be a good managed model owner? It's like, oh, you got money, come on in. Because it's a different profile though, right? Somebody who's going to be an owner operator in a home care organization, you want that empathy, compassion, a great why and all that stuff. But somebody who's going to be a semi-passive owner in the managed model and not directly forward facing in their business, it's okay that they have a different personality. We're going to select somebody for the managed model that we would probably never select as an owner operator. And so that's been tricky to really understand the profile of somebody who is best suited for that role. And so we've taken our lumps in that regard, right? I mean, we've sold to some people where it just wasn't the right thing. And I think what I've learned by and large is that regardless of whether you're going to be and this translates to anybody, listening to this who's looking for a franchise in any industry. Okay. What I'm about to say, what I've discovered is that, whether you're an owner operator or a semi-passive owner, managed model owner, your why is still important. And if the why is just, this seems like something that's a growing industry and I want to make money, that's not a good enough why. That's not a good enough why to keep you in this business for the long term, because you know what? Every home care organization has the opportunity to be successful. But the magic big question mark is, okay, well, if every home care organization has the opportunity to be successful, what is it? What is the difference maker? It's time. And if you give your business the opportunity to stand the test of time, you're going to eventually create a viable business. It's not going to sit around and struggle forever if you're doing the right things. But you might go in a year and a half, you might go, I'm doing all the right things. My business isn't as powerful as I want it to be. You need to give it more time under its legs. And we've seen some, different locations are different. And we've seen folks in some hyper competitive areas that maybe it took them more time to find their footing and they weren't sure it was going to work. And then you fast forward to today and they go, man, I'm glad I stuck it out, And so if people don't have a good why and a good gut connection to their business, then they're going to throw it away. They're not going to give it the chance to stand.
Yeah, you could have a few bad months and essentially you throw it away.
That's the deal, because owning a business is emotionally and financially stressful. I mean, let's be honest about it. And so if you don't truly believe in what your business does for the world, for your community, then
if that doesn't get you out of bed and super excited, probably shouldn't go into business ownership, period, but definitely not in the home care space.
But Patrick, in some businesses, just the desire to make money might translate to okay, right? But not
exactly.
Because we're dealing with a vulnerable population. We're not the kind of business where you open your door of your office and people come in for services. We're not a restaurant, right? And so, we're dealing
if you're selling unhealthy food, probably not super passionate about the end product, and You're fine. You're doing it for money, and depending on the model, you can make a lot of money.
Right. And so with home care, you do have to have some expressed why that makes sense to all of us, and something where we can go, that's going to keep you in this because you believe in this. Maybe you had an experience with your parents that really started.
That's what I've heard. It's usually you've been a caregiver before, or you've gone through the experience with your parents or a loved one that really drew you in, and then you can't get out of the industry because it's just there's a lot of positive attributes, and you see a huge impact.
A lot of our owners were dealing with care for their parents and found that a lot of the care out there was not good, and they found that they really struggled and nobody guided them down this process, and they had to educate themselves on what resources are available, who pays for this, how do I do this, and so that's that inspires a lot of people, I think.
Well, Kurt, I think we'll end on that. You summarized well the type of people that should go into home care, as well as I think more generally business ownership, but there are exceptions for certain industries. What's the best way for people to reach out to you or your colleagues if they're interested in learning more about a better solution in home care?
Well, I think you edit this, so I don't know if you put URLs up on the screen, but our website is a good place to start. Our franchise website is homecarefranchisepartners.com. Home Care Franchise Partners.
We'll include that in the description as well as the show notes for our podcast.
So that's a great place to start. Also, our main website is a good place to to just get an idea of where our franchise locations are, who are our owners, the types of services offered. And that's ABS, like A Better Solution, ABSIHC.com, like A Better Solution in Home Care, ABSIHC.com. And get a really good idea of the mix of people. Sometimes people, like when I'm buying something myself or investigating companies, it's funny, I like to see who the leadership is. And so, it's an opportunity to go to the website,
team,
right? Look at the locations, look at the owners, look at their bios, and get an idea of the flavor of this business. And I think that when you look at the people involved and their backgrounds, I think you get a better flavor of this business that you're investigating.
I've seen across the board, the most successful franchise systems have franchisees that had a very impressive background before they entered. They didn't become successful in the franchise system. It helped further propel their career. Yeah. They already had some success, whether it's monetary or non-monetary in the past, but in whatever they were doing in their field, they were really good at it. Yeah. They enter the franchise system, and there's a bunch of other franchisees that have prior success, and it's a virtuous circle.
Yeah, and to that point, and I just kind of, end on saying that if you're dealing with one person, who's interested in this industry, and I'm speaking of any industry, this industry, I'm honed in on this industry, I encourage people to investigate at least a couple of brands in that industry, because just because that industry makes sense for you doesn't mean that franchisor does. You may thrive in this franchisor's system, but not in this franchisor's system. And so that's why the people in the franchise are important. And you need to be able to, compare and contrast, right? Opportunities. And some people just look at, one franchisor in different industries they're interested in, but I'm not sure that that's enough, right? For most people. And so, if you're in the right franchise system for you, based on your goals and your personality and your aspirations and your capitalization and what kind of financing you have available, franchising, as a franchisor, myself and our CEO, I'll speak to her, we're in this to change people's lives. And, as a franchisor, we were in home care to change seniors' lives. But as a franchisor, we franchise to change our franchise owners' lives. And, get them to a place, help provide them a vehicle that takes their life to a place that they envisioned. And that's our goal. And people often ask, with this managed model, why don't you just open up a bunch of corporate affiliates around the country and keep all the money? And the answer is really not what most people expect, which is what turns us on as a franchisor is creating successful entrepreneurs and business owners around the country. And ultimately, then we really impact a lot of seniors through our brand around the country. And so that's just our heart for this type of work.
Yeah, I'm sure you can have just a much bigger scale growing the way you do versus if you grew a separate path with more corporate locations, more impact.
I think so.
Awesome, Kurt. Well, I appreciate your time today. We'll be sure to include the links to your website's description as well as the show notes. And just wanted to thank you again.
Sounds good. Thank you. It's a pleasure speaking with you.